we're primates. We're both very smart, and we're kind of lazy, and we wanna, we wanna have comfort. When we do these things, we take a little bit of our humanity away. Um, when we try to escape the pressures of survival, sometimes we get a little bit carried away and we create these indulgent things, but then, these indulgent things, downstream, they enable, getting away from the brutality of survival, so we can't really throw them all out. But there are a lot of negative externalities, and how do you navigate those things? I always think about the Amish when I'm trying to answer this question, because if you look at the organization of different Amish societies in the sort of the Ordnung, it's called, there's a chart where you can look at different factions and you can see how they've approached technology. So some of them, they really do just live like 1600s German people. They really, like, their way of life is truly indistinguishable from that. And you could just transport them back to the 1600s and they'd be fine. And then there are other groups of Amish who, they'll use a phone, they'll use cell phones, but the cell phone will be locked up in a cupboard when they're not using it. It's just not a thing that you idly use. You only use it deliberately. You only use it with the intention of calling someone, having a conversation, turning it off, and then putting it away, or listening to your messages. Some Amish don't use showers. They only use baths. Some Amish use power lawnmowers. It's like you have to figure out, between these different groups, like how they've decided to orient their lives around technology. The crazy thing to me, though, is that they all put time into thinking about how they would orient themselves around technology. These weren't arbitrary decisions. These were, their view of looking at technology, how it altered how they were living, and they're like, okay, can we live with this? Is this good? What's going to happen if we have this? And we've never really done that. In,
Yeah.
in the broader West or whatever, how crazy is it that someone said, hey, we've developed this pill, and if you take this pill, you can have all the sex that you want, but there's no pregnancy. There's just no human reproduction whatsoever. And everyone was like, "Yeah, cool. Let's put it on. let's put it in every doctor's office. Let's have it at pharmacies. Children can get it. It's just, there was very little. Think of all of the ink that's been spilled in terms of, gun policy, right? Everyone on, let's say the left, they can look at a modern firearm and they can be like, gee, I don't know. Were the founding fathers really thinking about an AR-15? Were they really thinking about a 40 millimeter grenade launcher? Maybe not. And there's a kernel of truth to that argument. But we don't apply this to things like cell phones. We don't apply this to things like birth control. We don't apply this to things like the time spent on social media. These are incredibly powerful technologies that have altered us in fundamental ways, and they just sort of became ubiquitous in the 20th and 21st century. And like, no, there was no attention paid to it at all. And so, yes, the technology brothers are responsible for the above and below the API separation. Yes. The social reformers of the 20th century are responsible for massive, massive changes. But I think it's just basically been a civilizational failure that everyone is in some sense culpable for, that we haven't asked for, and we haven't looked for, and we haven't created our own ways of dealing with any of these big changes.
Well, I think what you're pointing out is a lack of intentionality, and the example that you give with the Amish is a tremendous one because they're very intentional about everything that they do. I was just in central Pennsylvania this summer, did a little tour, got the whole spiel, and it's fascinating to me, the deliberateness with which they live. Whereas I think even our educated class, our people that are living their lives in a very comfortable way, who look on the surface as if they have planned, and we're describing a little bit of privilege here. They look as if they have decided to live in this way. They really didn't. They're just sort of floating. Mm-hmm. They're floating along a current that they found themselves in. And, whether they have the CPU power to, get this stuff done, they obviously do. So, they've earned it in some respect, but did they choose it?
Yes.
is the question, and it's intentionality. I think that's going to set. I mean, and it always has, but maybe more in a more pronounced fashion moving forward. Intentionality is a superpower. Intentionality will separate you from most of the people. No, if you think this tweet's about you, it is, but no intent, no insulting anybody here. But if you're not thinking about where you're going and what you're doing and who you're associating with and what your plan is and what you're learning and what your project is, what your systems are and what you're eating and what your tech use is and how you're earning and where you're going beyond the normal, I'm going to college, I'm going to take some debt and get a job, then you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Intentionality is going to separate people from the rest. And I guess
Yeah.
that does seem to be a characteristic that would apply to the above and below the API is, I'm intentionally going to manipulate this thing to do things, or I'm going to receive instructions. Guys out there, don't be an instruction receiver. Be an
Yeah.
instruction giver and start by giving yourself the instructions. Interesting to me to think about how collectively intentionality is going to be harnessed. Is there a way that you foster it in yourself personally? Is there a way that you foster it in your organizational structure? Is there a way that we can organize this economically? What about nationally?
Yeah, yeah. So these are all great questions. I mean, so for me, like when I went to college, I was like, okay, I'm gonna study math and chemistry, and then I'm gonna be a chemist, and then I'm gonna go work for like Eli Lilly and just make bank and kind of like sort of halfway through. Also, there's this period in grad school called quals. It's like sort of the first thing you do where you basically, it's just like, hey, you're not going to do research right now because you have these exams coming up where you just have to once again certify that you're like, you're fit to be in grad school. And so what that meant is I suddenly had like no time in lab and I was just like studying for exams. But it's like it's the same stuff that you've been studying for a long time, so you don't really need to do it. And what it meant is that I just had a lot of time to think, and I was talking to people in my lab. Same undergrad as grad school lab, and I was talking to one of the postdocs, and he was like, he was commuting in from like Tenafly, New Jersey. He was this married father of three. I mean, he still is, but like,
Mhm.
he was commuting in from pretty far away in New Jersey, and I was just talking to him. I was like, yeah, so like, what's your compensation? And this guy, he was doing his second postdoc at a very well regarded research lab, one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, bar none. And he told me the number, and I was just like, "What the fuck? Like, are you serious?" And I was, I obviously I knew that researchers, didn't really, academic researchers didn't make, great money, but it was just, I was like 23 at the time. I was just like, oh my God, I have to get out. This is like the worst. This is like the worst thing I've ever heard. Like, what am I doing? And yeah, I mean, I dropped out obviously, and I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? What do I want to do? Like, what will I be proud of myself for having done? And that has been kind of like my motivation, kind of very consciously since then, as opposed to just like, I think when I was younger, it was just like, flex on people because you got the highest grades, flex on people because like you did, you like swam faster than they did, just kind of like dumb stuff. But it's like, it's sort of like very accessible to a young person, I think, to be like, oh, if I'm on a sports team, I'm gonna do the best that I can. If I'm in school, I'm gonna do the best that I can. But why? Right? Like what are you trying to get out of it? That was not a question I had asked myself, but that was a question I started asking myself after this experience. And for many years, I didn't have a really good answer, and so I would go from job to job, thinking like, well, this is interesting. I can learn stuff. They'll pay me money. I'll have a good time. That's fine. But it's really only the last like 2 or 3 years, I think, that I felt that there's certain political discontentments that I have, and there are obviously very few ways to address them with formal politics, but maybe there are ways to address them with technology. And so, maybe there are ways to sort of to organize and sort of rebuild better structures to live in that are not these people, that are not governed by the kinds of people that govern San Francisco or the kinds of people that run, Facebook. Maybe there's a way to get away from all of that. And what I'm saying in so many words is exit, and the exit of our voice paradigm. But that's kind of like my internal driving force. How do you do it for an organization? How do you do it for a country, a nation, a city? Those are bigger questions, but I think they're just sort of fractal blowups of the same thing. Um, Internally, uh, a really, really good company is run kind of the same way a human body is run, where like, yeah, you have these independent, analyzable structures, these organs, but they're all sort of serving the larger being. They're not really. Yeah, I mean, this is what a corporation is. This is why it's called that, right? It's a corporate body. It's a thing that's brought together. It's that's the point of it. Um, so I think that, what do you want to do and why do you want to do it and how are you going to get it done? Asking those questions and being really, really detailed and granular and willing to change if things don't work out. I think that's the only way to get anything done.